Well, hi everyone. Welcome to our debut OnFrontiers Expert Chat live discussion forum. I'm Gavin Serkin, Editorial Director at OnFrontiers. And for those not yet familiar with OnFrontiers, the host for our Expert Chat forums is an online platform that connects business professionals with experts to learn about complex and specialized topics in frontier and emerging markets. OnFrontiers is all about opening access to some of the best minds working in emerging markets and frontier markets globally through every medium possible. And this comes through our guest blogs, private consultations within the community of several thousand experts, and through live forums like the one we're on today. There's more information on the frontiers.com website, or you can follow up directly with the team, whose contact details will be provided to everyone here a little later. We're all busy people, so the idea is to keep these forums to just half an hour of really concentrated ideas and dialogue. I've got a great list of questions from all of the participants, which I've tried to curate as much as possible to get all of your themes and topics discussed. We want to keep this discussion as interactive as possible. So as further questions come to mind during this discussion, as we're talking, please do post them up on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and I'll do my best to get them across to Alon. And just so everyone is aware, we do invite journalists to these forums in the interests of channeling the insights discussed here to a wider audience. The only thing we'd ask of journalists, please, is to cite OnFrontiers Expert Chat Forum when quoting, so that readers know where to come back to for more information. So without further ado, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Alon Litz, the General Manager for Sub-Saharan Africa at Uber. Alon, welcome to our debut webinar. I want to start with your own journey, because you joined Uber 4 years ago as its first Africa General Manager, the first head of Sub-Saharan Africa, having spent much of your previous career in private equity and leveraged finance for Africa-focused institutions like Investec Bank and the Profit with Purpose investor Leapfrog Investments. So how did your transition come about to Uber? What's the story there?
Hi, Gavin. Thanks so much for having me. Very excited to be part of the debut show. So I was working with Leapfrog Investments, as you mentioned, and got a random email via LinkedIn. So I guess it's a great tech story from the Uber recruiter, Uber Continue, and at the time did all of our recruiting internally about an opportunity to join Uber in Johannesburg as its general manager. Uber, roughly 4 years ago, was quite different to the company that we are today. To give a sense for that, Joburg was the 34th city when we were launched in August of 2013, so a lot smaller than the over 450 cities that we're in today. Had heard of Uber, didn't know too much about it, did some research, saw this as a really exciting opportunity to get involved in what would be a startup in my home city, with the backing of some really formidable investors, some great entrepreneurs behind the business. So jumped at that opportunity, obviously very different to the world I was used to in banking and private equity, but I was looking for an opportunity to get more operational and to help build a business. And obviously Uber ticked those boxes.
Okay, and what a journey. So in expanding to all those places in Africa, leading that expansion drive, what kind of barriers did you experience in entering markets, and what barriers are still an issue for Uber in Africa?
Yeah, so I think that the biggest barrier to growth that we've come across, and one where I feel we do have a solution, and it's not perfect yet and it's always evolving, but has been the barrier around payment. So Nairobi was the second city for Uber globally to test cash. This happened in May of 2015. And cash for Uber, 3 years ago was almost a swear word, because it went against everything that the company stood for in that part of what is core to the experience, is being able to get in the car, take your ride, and that amount automatically billed to your card on file. So it took a lot of internal lobbying to convince people like Travis that cash was needed. And what we were seeing in Nairobi was a large number of people signing up to take a ride with Uber and then falling off and never actually taking a trip. When we dug into that, when we did more research around that, what we were finding was that credit or check cards, or were not willing or comfortable to use their credit or check card online because there's just not the same comfort across the continent around e-commerce. So we ran a pilot with cash that was exceptionally successful. Kenya was the first country on the continent to offer cash to all riders. We now offer cash across the continent. Africa was the first continent to do so, and it's really transformed the business. That was truly the biggest barrier when it came to a rider growth perspective. Obviously, cash introduces complications, whether it's safety, where we've got things like emergency numbers for driver partners. I think, unfortunately, safety is, and crime is a reality across the continent. So that's not really cash specific, but cash does really bring up questions around safety amongst driver partners. So the emergency number, which gives drivers access to both security and emergency services in the event of an emergency, was an innovation developed locally. We have a way for driver partners to deposit cash 24/7 in South Africa through an ATM network, through a partnership with First National Bank. Some drivers actually see cash as a huge positive because it helps with daily operational expense and provides sundry cash flow. So really, it's about adapting to local challenges. Another one would be around network quality, where in some cases, drivers just lose signal or a particular network may go down. And obviously, we're not a telco, we're not investing in towers across the continent, but a simple operational solution is we recommend that drivers going online always have a second network provider as backup. So in the event that one provider goes down, they can slip in a second SIM and remain online and get rides. So it's really about adapting to local problems. We've got local teams in every city where we operate. The local team works very closely with our central team in SSA based out of Johannesburg, ensuring that we can identify problems locally, innovate locally, and really scale solutions across the continent.
Okay, it's kind of ironic that your first experience with cash was in Kenya, which is known for the mobile money. But I wanted to move on to expansion from here, from where you are across all these cities in Africa. Where's next? What destinations are still on Uber's itinerary?
So as a first core principle, I think globally, Travis has always said that we want to be in every city around the world with an addressable population of more than 200,000 people. So if you think about that with the lens of the African continent, there are multiple cities which are on our radar and which we're excited about going into the future. If we look at the short term, we're looking to Francophone Africa next, with the likely next city being Abidjan in Ivory Coast. So that's really next up on our list, and a city where we'd like to be active before the end of the year. Assuming things go well there, we also see opportunity in Senegal, potentially Zambia, potentially Rwanda. But for the moment, the team is very much focused on our existing countries, potential expansion in our existing countries to new cities. And we really believe that we're hitting the tip of the iceberg when it comes to market potential. We see market potential on the continent and globally as Uber providing an alternative to car ownership. And if you think about it with that lens, I mean, I don't own a car in South Africa. I Uber to work every day. And obviously I Uber when I'm traveling. And I look around me when I'm sitting in that Uber, and there are a large number of people in private vehicles, single occupancy vehicles, and that's our market potential. How do we get those individuals to ditch their keys and Uber around their cities?
Okay, some people think of, especially investors, think of East versus West in Africa. Just weigh up the two big economies, Kenya and Nigeria, if you can. How would you compare doing business in Nigeria versus Kenya?
So I think key point for me is both equally exciting opportunities, great places to do business, both markets which we're extremely excited about. If I have to weigh them up, Kenya and or East Africa in general is probably an easier place to do business.
And why is that?
I don't think. Sure. Why is that? I think we've seen more operational challenges in Nigeria, not necessarily Uber specific, but more at a macro level. For example, at the beginning of last year, we saw the ban on international payments on cards, which obviously led to complications operationally for us. We introduced cash. We switched to local acquiring in Nigeria. And that's a challenge which you don't face everywhere. I mean, we've seen fuel shortages in Nigeria, again, not Uber specific, but not often that a country or a city runs short on fuel. And obviously, a fuel shortage makes it challenging to ensure that people have access to reliable and affordable transport at a touch of a button. Some other challenges would be the forex devaluation that we've seen. Yes, you do see that elsewhere, but I think it's been more pronounced in Nigeria, and it's not the end of it. So I think if you are wearing an investor hat, that does raise questions, that does raise concerns. That being said, the opportunity and the market potential there is just so massive. It's a market which we're not walking away from. If anything, we're more excited than ever before. And personally, I'm spending more time focused on Nigeria just because we believe that there's an untapped opportunity there and so much potential to still unlock in the future.
Okay, and given all this potential and opportunity that you're chasing, is Uber looking for more investors at this point, or have you reached some kind of saturation point as far as capital raising is concerned?
Yes, so that's something that's driven centrally by a business development team. It's not something which I'm involved in, so not really the best place to comment on that.
Okay, I want to drill down to some of the specifics that you'll be involved in running Uber in Africa. Just explain, if you will, the rationale behind Uber setting different driver and passenger rates for each African country. How do you set the right level? You know, when do you decide the fair's fair, if you like?
Yeah, so I think a key principle here is that Uber works when it works for our driver partners. And what's crucial to us is that the earnings that driver partners can gain access to using our software are sustainable. So we spend a lot of time trying to understand what operational costs are in a city before we launch. We do think about pricing slightly differently from an efficiency perspective. And why I say that, I think there's a traditional mindset that lower prices mean lower earnings for driver partners. But we don't think about things that way. I think if you think about a driver partner who is online on the platform, he or she can be doing one of three things. They can be waiting for a trip, they can be driving to pick up a fare-paying passenger, or they can be carrying a fare-paying passenger. So the way we think about things is that lower prices lead to higher demand. So there's fewer dead kilometers in the system because drivers are not driving 20 kilometers to pick up a passenger. They're hopefully driving 2-3 kilometers to pick up a passenger, dropping someone off, and then picking up another passenger. Through lower prices, we see higher demand, so lower wait time between trips, and therefore drivers are spending more time on trip. So what we try and determine is what is that optimal price point that will really minimize wait time between trips. Obviously, as the business reaches maturity in a city and supply is more reliable, there are more drivers online on the platform. There are fewer dead kilometers. So there's fewer, and dead kilometers are just a point in time when drivers are incurring costs, no revenue generation. So we'll obviously look to get supply to a point where those dead kilometers are minimized and drivers are spending the maximum amount of time possible on trip, therefore really optimizing their earnings.
Okay, and in terms of driving as much as possible, the temptation will be to go faster, to get passengers where they're going, to get the money. And you know, as a lot of people in the audience will testify, you know, driving in some African cities can be pretty hair-raising. How do you go about ensuring drivers drive safely, you know, while also avoiding taking on the role of paternalistic employer, because these drivers are your contractors, not your employees?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, it is a bit of a balance. We do try use technology in any way that we can. So for example, The phone, the driver application is monitoring driving behavior. Drivers are sent reports which notify them of aggressive acceleration or harsh braking or harsh turning, with the view of if they have access to that information, they can improve their driving technique. Obviously, upfront, there's a screening process in place before a driver can gain access to our software application. In addition to that, there is software which is monitoring the number of hours that drivers are online. If it's an excessive number of hours, then drivers are sent a notification and letting them know that it's reaching a point where it's becoming dangerous, and we suggest that a break should be taken. So how can we use technology to monitor driving behavior and, importantly, improve driving behavior? There's also technology which we recently introduced, which monitors if the phone's being held while driving, or whether a mount is being used, because we've noticed that there is a big impact on driving behavior, similar to texting and driving, when a driver is holding a phone versus a phone being used in a mount. So we're using that feedback that we can measure using the application. We're relying upon customer feedback, and we're actioning that as quickly as possible using technology.
Okay, one area that Uber has, I think, probably faced its greatest challenge is reaching out to the lower income segments. As you mentioned, you had to push to get cash accepted. There was a lot of discussion there. What are your plans in this area? And I want to tie this to a question from one member of the audience, Lai. Apologies if I've pronounced that wrong, but Lai asked, further to the payment problems, is Uber partnering with fintech startups to solve this cash problem? So maybe you can answer both points about lower income segments and opportunities for tie-ups to solve the cash issue.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with the fintech question. So yes, we are partnering. We are looking to integrate some form of mobile money solution into the payment journey using Uber. I think the unicorn that we're looking for is some gateway that will give us access to multiple geographies versus country-specific geographies. Obviously, as a company, we've got limited engineering time, so it's easier for us to motivate a business case that has applicability across multiple cities or multiple countries. Just to the point on Kenya that you raised earlier, riders at the end of a trip can choose to pay the driver cash or can choose to make an M-Pesa transfer to their driver. That's not in-app, but that happens outside of the app at the end of a trip. To the point around what else we're doing to unlock lower income riders, I think as a key principle, we're always looking at ways to make Uber more accessible to more people. We would consider new products, whether that would be a boda type product as an example, or potentially a higher capacity product that went across a fixed route. So not the same flexibility that the current UberX product would give you, but some form of fixed route to allow for higher capacity trips and lower costs. Another example, the final example would be a product like Uber Pool, which, using technology with the current UberX product, we can match you to an individual who you may or may not know, who's leaving at a similar time and heading to a similar destination.
Okay. Looking at this push into, coming up with creative solutions to reach a bigger market, and particularly the lower income segment, who do you see as your biggest business threat out there? Who are your biggest competitors? Because there's a lot of them. There's Afro, Easy Taxi, Ogre Taxi, Maramoja, Mondo Ride, Taxify. There's a lot of different services that are now pushing for your business.
So, I mean, we see the competition as a fantastic thing for the industry as a whole. I think the more companies out there that are trying to get people in the mindset of using a smartphone to request a ride, whether it's a sedan vehicle or something else, the better. Because 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that was a foreign concept. So the more people creating that awareness, the better. And it also means that we need to ensure that we maximize the value that we create for both riders and driver partners using the platform. So I see the competition as a good thing. As you mentioned, there are a number of competitors across the continent, and all companies which we respect and individuals that we respect behind them.
Okay, well, as we all know from the logos and the campaigns by now, Uber Eats. What else is Uber going to do in Africa?
So I think if you look to the future, what could be really exciting, and I think something which is discussed ad nauseum, is that last mile delivery problem across the continent. So is there a way that Uber can assist in that ecosystem to help with last mile delivery, whether that is your existing Uber X driver who, in addition to carrying a person, is carrying a passage, or is that dedicated tuk-tuks that can more easily navigate through traffic and help with last mile delivery? So if you think about this from an e-commerce perspective, if imagine you had your own little business in Lagos, and you could log onto a platform, request that a driver comes to pick up multiple items for a number of your customers, and our technology then connects you with the driver, who will then be routed to drop off those multiple items on your behalf. And while he or she does that, your clients get SMSs or notifications where they can track the trip in real time. So that's really exciting to us. And if we look to the future, that we think could be an exciting development on the continent.
Okay, you mentioned that the more and more people are using smartphones and ordering their sedans or taxis, the better for you. Uber has, of course, been a big beneficiary of this rapid, huge uptake in smartphones in Africa, helped by ever cheaper Chinese handsets. Perhaps wearing your hat as someone with experience in private equity and the impact investing world in Africa particularly, what other innovations or apps are out there that excite you right now for the continent?
So I'm going to talk to two. I think one is actually a Leapfrog company. I was chatting to one of the partners from Leapfrog last week when I was in Nairobi, and it's a company called Juno. They do nano loans, not micro loans, and where the largest market at the moment is Tanzania, where they're growing at an extremely rapid rate. And what's really interesting about their business model is they're doing nano loans to entrepreneurs who are traders. And what you'll see is that these loans are happening quite early in the morning, 3, 4 a.m. in the morning. And most of those loans are then paid back later that day. So it really is a loan for working capital. And through technology, through the data points that Juno are looking at, and they look at everything, including whether you do or don't charge your smartphone or your cell phone at night, they are giving entrepreneurs access to capital, which is helping them build and scale their businesses. So that's a business which I see as really exciting, and a business which is not necessarily about finance in the traditional sense. It's about data and using that data to really empower entrepreneurs. Another one would be a company called Aerobotics, operating in a completely different space, in the agri space, where they've got software technology where that's connected to a drone. The drone obviously goes up over farmlands, and they can then analyze the farmland and provide farmers with information as to what land is arable and where are your crops going to best grow, and where do you have issues and what can you do to address that. So there's a lot of exciting stuff going on in the tech world across Africa. And I think it's something, again, which has been said ad nauseum, but a lot of this innovation is coming out of necessity. And that's really where the exciting innovation happens, facing problems on the ground and problem solving around that.
Okay, a couple of companies to watch there then. Juno under the Leapfrog umbrella, and Agribotics, you said?
Aerobotics.
Okay. Question from one of the audience who asks, you mentioned, Alon, that you send a notification to a driver if they have been driving for too long. Why not force them to have a break?
So that is something that we're testing in certain markets. I think to your point, Gavin, it's a bit of a fine line. These are not individuals who we employ. We cannot, unfortunately, control their hours. But in some cases, it does reach a point in time where drivers may be forced offline and won't be able to take trips for a period of time.
Okay, now we all willingly submit our data to Uber and other apps where we live, where we take our regular journeys, our payment details. How safe is this data by Uber and on other apps out there that you're aware of that are evolving? You know, maybe in some of the less regulated countries, particularly in Africa, do you worry about the security of such personal data?
Yeah, so I think as a general principle, we follow the highest standards when it comes to data protection. We don't store data locally, it's all stored centrally. We ensure that we have the highest levels of safeguards in place. And it's extremely important to us that that data is not compromised. It's also in terms of what data employees do and don't have access to. Data can only be accessed as employees for strict business purposes. And when we do make decisions based on data, which we do on a daily basis, we're not making it based on individuals' personalized data, but rather data in the aggregated sense, to then use that info to make business decisions.
Okay, that's an interesting point. It's an interesting
Sorry,
point on the aggregation of data, because you've got a lot of data in the system. Clearly, we're hearing a lot about applications of big data, smart data. How does Uber view this area in terms of utilizing or monetizing the extensive data that you've got on all these journeys, all these people's activities, whether they opt for a premium Uber X or a cheaper pooled service? Do you see this data being used, for example, for credit scoring, from Uber helping a third party, or getting loans to underserved consumers?
Yeah, so I'll first talk to what we're doing right now on the driver partner side, because this is live and we're doing exactly that. I think a huge challenge that we've seen across the continent is that access to capital remains a barrier to individuals who are looking to start their own businesses. So a driver who's looking to drive on the platform may not be able to qualify for credit and purchase a vehicle. So we've got partnerships live in South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria, where on the back of a driver partner's track record on the Uber platform, so the number of trips that he or she have completed, his or her rating, as well as his or her earnings over an extended period of time, that driver partner can then take that information, share that with the financial institution. In South Africa, it's Westbank. In Kenya, it's Citizen Bank. And in Nigeria, we've just launched a pilot with First Bank of Nigeria. They can then share that information with the credit institution, who's now not looking at a traditional credit record. They're almost looking at an Uber scorecard or an Uber credit rating, and making a decision to provide capital, whether that's through a full maintenance lease or a direct loan, on the back of that credit record. So we see that it's being hugely powerful. I think if we take that one step further, and we're seeing, as we've chatted about on this call, is that there are a large number of people who are using cash to take rides on Uber every day. And we're starting to build up a track record for these individuals. Are they paying for their trips? Do they ever not pay, etc.? And after a point in time, do we reach a world where these individuals could potentially gain access to credit for rides on the platform, or credit just more generally? I think we may, and that's a really exciting development.
How quickly do you think that could come?
That's something which we're working on. I'd like to say, and I'd like to hope that we'll be there by the end of the year.
Okay, I've got one final question from our audience before we run out of time. Is there anything in particular, Alon, that you are looking for when you decide to partner with alternative payment options, say bank accounts, etc.? Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, John. So I think the key principle for us would obviously be track record. We do want to see that you can deliver. I think in addition to that, and the point that I raised earlier, any solution that we look at, we want to, if it has applicability in multiple markets, if it's a single point of entry for us that gives us multi-market applicability, that's a huge selling point, because we're looking to scale solutions and not create bespoke solutions which require replication of work across multiple cities.
Okay, very final question from Alon. What sorts of municipal authority pushbacks have you received so far, if any? You've got 20 seconds to answer that one.
So look, I'm not going to do it justice in 20 seconds. I think as a key principle, we've had a much softer landing across SSA versus some other markets globally. Yes, we have seen some pushback, but I think largely speaking, we are creating a public transport solution for riders, which previously did not exist. We're creating unprecedented economic opportunity for driver partners. And as a whole, regulators see these benefits and, largely speaking, welcome the development and the benefits that technology can bring, rather than choose to fight it.
Okay, Alon, thank you for a truly insightful deep dive into Uber's journey in Africa. I want to also thank OnFrontiers founders Anna Croyer and Brian Cowett for putting together this forum, ably assisted by the team behind them. And thank you, our participants, for feeding the discussion with some really great questions coming through today. Let us know your thoughts on the topics that you've heard discussed today by tweeting on the hashtag #ExpertChat. We'll be sending everyone on this call the full video just in case you missed anything, along with the profiles of the participants on the onfrontiers.com platform where we continue the conversation. You can sign up to OnFrontiers for free to engage in further conversations with Alon or other participants, or to start learning directly from thousands of other experts around the world in 47 emerging and frontier countries. Coming up in the next 2 weeks at the same time, 2 weeks time, of 11:30 in New York and 4:30 in London, we'll be exploring the changing world of global energy with an entrepreneur who's created the first truly industrial scale solar fields in 4 countries in Africa, as well as Latin America. That's April 18th with the founder of JCM Power, Christian Ray. And 2 weeks after that, on May 2nd, we're going to be taking you inside Morgan Stanley's headquarters for a conversation with the head of emerging markets investing, a man described on Barron's front page recently as Wall Street's global thinker. It is, of course, the best-selling author and money manager, Ruchir Sharma. So I hope you can join us again for these discussions. Thank you all and have a great rest of the day.